an honor and privilege to have Mr. Deepak Mittal as our guest speaker for this session.
Thank you, Sangeeta. Thank you so much for a very graceful introduction. Does business drive technology or technology drive business? Why is this question even important? So there are two aspects to this. Let me first start with a personal story here. As Sangeeta said, I've spent close to 3 decades in the technology sector, primarily in sales and business development roles, trying to get business globally. So it was very important for me to get a sense of what impact my solutions, my technologies are having on my customers. It was personally very important for me to figure that out, because what happens when you're a salesperson is that obviously you are going to go and push what you have, and technology by nature is a very exciting, very exciting field. The sheer luminescence, the glow of technology can sort of make you blind to several other aspects which are needed to run the business as well. And so it was personally a mission for me to figure this out, whether technology is something which is making an impact on business at all, number one. And number two, whether we as technology sales people, whether we as technology companies, as Indian IT services companies, whether we are able to really address that aspect of our customers' life. So that is one part of it. Second part of it is the times that we are living in. Technology literally pervades our lives. Our TV screens are full of advertisements of companies which are looking to train young people on building mobile apps. Just an example. There are companies like Uber, there are companies like Netflix, Airbnb, who are today so big, and yet they don't own assets in the conventional sense of the term, in the way conventional businesses ever did. So one may be pardoned for thinking that all I need to build a business, therefore, is to have some kind of a technology play. And once I have it, that's all I need to go to an investor and ask for money, to go to a customer and say, look, here's something that's going to change your life altogether. Is it as simple as that? Now, as we try to understand this better, I think a good starting point would be to understand, first of all, what business is. What is business? What makes a business? What makes a business successful? And then we can examine what role technology plays within that. So that is roughly the format that I'm going to follow over the next 35-40 minutes, following which we can have Q&A. So let me start from the beginning. What is business? What is business? So any entity that is engaged in commercial activity. I'm trying to keep it very simple here, because the purpose here is not to, there can be a lot of nuances around this definition itself. If you were to look up online, you will probably find several other definitions. I've just chosen a single liner here for the purposes of my presentation today. Any entity engaged in commercial activity. So a corner store is a business, a provision store is a business, Hindustan Lever is a business, JW Marriott is a business, Airbnb is a business. So business has many dimensions, but basically it is ultimately engaged in a commercial activity, whether for profit or non-profit also. In some cases, you might be doing business to, you might be doing a certain activity to raise awareness, for example, to deliver on some welfare for a large segment of population, but you are still organized in a manner of a business. So what do I mean when I say organized? So just like a car has gears and the gears need to work together so that the car moves forward. When you press the accelerator and you turn the steering, you want the car to go in a certain direction, right? So just like that, business also has gears. What are these gears? There is the back office, which is finance operations. There is the front office, which is marketing, sales. At a very high level, there are probably several other activities which get into making a business, but at a very high level, these are the big gears of business. So what happens if I want to sell something? I need marketing to support that in terms of product creation. And marketing needs support from finance and operations to make sure that it is able to do its job well. So when the gears work together, business starts working. When does a business work? When it is able to move quickly in response to changes, events, regulatory changes in the marketplace, technology changes in the marketplace, uh, different kind of customer needs, etc. It is responsive to its employees, to its partners, to obviously to its customers. It is competitive in the sense that it is able to get market share from its competitors. Typically, when you evaluate a business's strength, you will look at its ability to wrest market share, to be able to get business away from its competitors, right? And then finally, end of the day, business must deliver value, meaning the output of a business must be greater than the input that goes into the business. If you meet these four parameters, then you can say that my business is working. If it doesn't, what are some examples of businesses where it doesn't work? Some of our public sector companies, for example, they are probably not the most nimble movers. They are not responsive. They are not very competitive, and they sometimes deliver losses after losses for years together, right? So that is an example for business which is not working. On the other hand, if you look at a business like, let's say, an Apple is responsive, is operating with agility, is competitive, and it delivers value, right? It is probably the most valuable company today in the world. What holds this together? What enables delivery on all these different parameters is what is called business strategy. What is business strategy? Strategy, and this is Jack Welch, ex-chairman of GE, a legendary business person and inspiration. And I don't think anybody could have put it better than how Jack Welch has put it. Strategy is resource allocation. End of the day, where are you putting your money? Where are you putting your effort? A lot of you are students. What are the resources that you have? You have your time. You have your capability of putting in physical work. Where are you putting that effort? That is your strategy. Where do you decide to not to put in the effort is also a strategy. So just like that, whether it is a corner shop, whether it is a large organization like Tata Consultancy Services, you have to make choices about where and how you will compete, because you cannot be everything to everybody. You will never have such deep pockets that you will become everything to everybody. So you have to make choices. So you start by defining your strategy. What does the strategy comprise of? This is from an article called How Strategy Really Works, published in HBR Press, a classic article. I would request everyone to, whenever you have time, do look it up and read it. It's a fascinating article. So there are several boxes, hexagons that this picture shows us. What is our winning aspiration? What do I want to become? If you look at a market like mobile devices or mobile phones, for example, there are several players in the mobile phones market. There is Apple, there is Samsung, there is Real, Realme, there is OnePlus, right? So there are several vendors here. Each one has a different winning aspiration. It's not one and the same. They may be in the same market, they may be selling similar products, but where are we playing? Which markets are we competing in? Whether it is geography, whether it is demographics, how are we going to win in those markets? The answer may be different for a me, answer may be different for Apple. In order to win, what are the capabilities that you must have? If you are going to be on the value end of the marketplace, that I'm going to deliver the largest amount of value at the lowest amount of price, what are the capabilities that you must have? On the other hand, if you want to say that, look, I'm going to be the innovator and I'll always be the leader as far as innovation is concerned, I'll always be the first one to market, bringing new capability, new features to marketplace, right? And so therefore, what kind of management systems you must have to govern this process? Because it's not a one-off thing. It's not like somebody sits in a room and says, this is the way I'm going to be. And behold, everybody starts working in that respect. It is going to take time to roll out, and it is going to take a lot of functional activities, a lot of stuff, for example, to be done on your production, a lot of stuff to be done on your marketing, on your sales, on your showrooms, right? Before it becomes a reality. So therefore, to govern this entire setup, you must have certain processes. And so therefore, strategy is really a synthesis of a lot of these things. There is a famous company, McKinsey. A lot of you might have heard of it. McKinsey is probably one of the oldest consulting companies in the world, more than almost 100 years old now, and almost a legendary company. Two of McKinsey's consultants, very famous consultants in 70s and 80s, 1970s and 1980s, Robert Waterman and the name is skipping my mind right now. So these two gentlemen came out, they studied several good companies, several successful companies, and they came out with a book called In Search of Excellence. And in that book, they proposed this particular model, what they call the 7S model. What are the 7 S's here? If you look at strategy here on the right hand side, on the right extreme, and then if you go clockwise down, to deliver on a strategy, you need a certain organization structure. Every organization has a certain style, certain way in which it does things. I don't want to get into a lot of details. This itself will take a lot of time, but at a very high level, style is really the way in which you work, whether degree of autonomy, for example, that you give in the organization, amount of freedom that lower down the organization you give your teams to act upon what they might think is the right thing to do. That is something that is an element of style. Whether you want to compete on prices, whether you want to compete on innovation, these are all styles. And you cannot easily walk away from your style. It can come from your founder, it may come from a, a set of key personnel that you have in the company, but every company has a certain style. The system is not just the IT or the technology system, is the entire processes that are running the company. Ultimately, you need processes on HR, you need processes on finance, you need processes at the shop floor, etc. So, all those are systems, the kind of people that you will hire, that is your staff, the sort of skills that they will have, and the shared values as a company. What are the values that you share? There was a company I used to work for, I will not name that company, where they said that, look, I will do business ethically and I will walk away from business if need be. but I will never compromise on my ethics. So that is a kind of a value that you have, and that value pervades every element of your strategy. So a lot of depictions of 7S model, you will see shared value right in the center. So ultimately, a strategy is a strategy when all of these things work together. Just defining a way that I'm going to work in your boardroom isn't going to work unless you also put corresponding elements in place across this entire circle. So that is the essence of the McKinsey 7S model. So a strategy ultimately must break down into several corresponding elements. It must also break down into several functional strategies. Whether, I right in the beginning, I talked about the key gears of business. So whether it is marketing, whether it is sales, whether it is finance, let's say somebody like a Reliance, for example, in their traditional petrochemicals business, has a strategy of controlling the entire chain from the oil field to the showroom to the petrol pump. They control this entire chain, right? That is their strategy. And by executing on such large projects in time and at low cost, they are able to have a sustainable competitive advantage in the marketplace, right? So that is a kind of a large strategy that Reliance has. And so therefore, finance function within Reliance has a certain goal in which how will they raise finances for the kind of long-term complex projects that they have, what kind of a supply chain they will have in order to work with their suppliers, what sort of marketing they will do, what kind of sales they will do. So, all these different functional strategies are derived from the large strategy. And they come together, the different functional elements, they come together ultimately in what is called a value chain. This is a concept given by Michael Porter, a famous professor from Harvard. And Michael Porter has also written a great deal about competition and different competitive strategies. And he has even extrapolated that to competitive advantages of nations. A fantastic amount of work that Michael Porter has done. And so this particular work, what he called the value chain, and this picture that I'm showing here is the way that he depicted it the first time. And if you go from left to right, you will see inbound logistics, operations. Inbound logistics is your suppliers. And I think it may be useful to take an example here. Let's say a car manufacturer will have several component vendors, people who are making steering systems, people who are making sheet metal, people who are making paints, people who are making tires, people who are making electronic components, sound systems, people who are giving seats and things. So a car is ultimately an assembly of several components which are brought together. And so you need the inbound logistics for that. You need operations, a shop floor where these things will be assembled. Outbound logistics, whereby this material, once it has been finished, production is done, has to be taken out to the marketplace. A marketing function, which has to create a demand in the marketplace, a sales function, which has to make sure that key elements of this entire process are completed, and customer service. Inevitably, whenever you sell any product, ultimately you will need to be able to support your customers. So this entire thing is what Michael Porter called a value chain. And then he said that these are the core activities, and underneath this you have several support activities such as infrastructure, human resource, technical development, procurement. Michael Porter was a professor, so he put this in a very professorial way. I prefer a simpler representation done by an artist of the value chain, which actually puts a little more color into those activities. And you can start seeing that each activity, each of these uh, functions that we have here is comprised of a series of tasks. And there are people who need to come together to complete that task. Now, why do I like this particular depiction is because ultimately a value chain is about people. Value chain can be only as good as the people who are executing on it. It is that person on the shop floor. It is that person at the customer support. This is that person in the marketing team. This is that person who's talking to the suppliers. If they don't know their job well, if they don't have the skills to do their job well, if they are not motivated, your value chain is going to fall flat. You can define it in as brilliant way as you want. Ultimately, people are needed to execute on tasks, right? People ultimately connect on processes. A process is what binds together the value chain from beginning to end. Process is what is putting it together. And processes are driven by technology. If you get it right, if you do it right, technology can actually bring a X factor to the whole process. Technology can really make it competitive. If you have heard of Dell computers, I'm sure probably a lot of you are already using Dell laptops. Michael Dell, what was the innovation that he did when he brought in Dell computers? He changed the value chain. He said, instead of people going to stores and making a choice of the laptop or computing device that they need, and being driven by what the store has and doesn't have, I'm going to open it up to them on the internet. So you can log on to Dell's portal and you can configure your laptop exactly the way that you want. You can decide what amount of RAM that you will need, what kind of a keyboard you will have, what kind of screen size you're going to have. And once you have done the configuration, Dell is going to ship it directly to you, right? So he has changed the value chain altogether. And it appeals to a lot of customers because they get a lot more freedom in being able to make their choice. So this is how a value chain is being driven by people, process, and technology. Technology is important. Why? Especially in current times, technology can disrupt value chain. Today, you can do so much more online. It was never possible to do that. Even a few years ago, when I first got a cell phone, and I've used the same provider for the last 15, 20 years, I would call probably the call center almost every week. There was always something or other that I needed to do with them. If I needed to change a rate plan, I needed somebody's support to really walk me through this entire thing. Today, you're able to do everything online. When was the last time we go to a bank? I mean, there was a time when I used to stand in queues in the bank to get a bank draft made. Today, transferring money is like so simple. Reading a book, uh, watching a movie, so many things are online, and this process is only accelerating. I mean, if Bitcoins were to become a reality or cyber currency were to become a reality, I don't know how our lives are going to look like in a few more times. So convergence of physical and digital worlds. While we are doing this, while we are online, we are also generating huge amount of data in terms of what we are using, where we are going, what kind of preferences we have, what kind of choices we have, who are the people that we connect to. There is obviously a privacy element, but I'm just going to stay away from that privacy element for the time being, for the purposes of this conversation. But there is a huge amount of data available for those who want to use it. And even a small company can today buy resources on the cloud, can get the best analytic ability out of the box, and can be up and running in no time. All right, something that would have taken years and a lot of trial and error on part of large companies to be able to put together is something which is easily doable today. And so in this market, now customer is the king, because if you don't have something, customer isn't going to wait for you to bring it up because there's so many more choices available online. It is also a fact that lines between industries have blurred because of the sort of advancement that technology has made possible. Today, a telecom operator can become a bank. A payment gateway can become a bank. So where does that leave the traditional bank? Right. So that bank also has to change its business. So that's just one example of the ways in which technology is changing business globally. All right. let's see this through a case study. A lot of stuff that I've talked about in terms of strategy, in terms of elements of strategy coming together to deliver value to a business, the value chain itself. Let's see how that works in case of this company called Asian Paints. Many of you may have already heard of it. Asian Paints is probably one of the premier Indian consumer companies, one of the most desired day one companies on campuses, and which has over a period of time really excelled in competing in a market which is largely commoditized. Paint is a paint is a paint, right? So end of the day, if you are still able to sell a lot more than your competition, there's probably something that you do much better than what your competition does. So 20 years ago, I think before I go forward on this, let me just take a little time, a minute or two, to explain to you what is the business model of Asian Paints. So Asian Paints manufactures paints. They have a factory. They probably have more than one factory. And then they have distributors in each state. And probably in the larger states, like Maharashtra or Tamil Nadu, they probably might have more than one distributor, right? So you have distributors. And then the distributor, in turn, connects with stockists at city levels, right? So if you have a master distributor for Maharashtra, he will probably have 20, 25 stockists in different parts of Maharashtra looking at one city, if you are a city like Mumbai, or a cluster of 2 or 3 cities together. Okay, and so you stock the paints, and then you go to a retailer. The retailer will buy the paints from the stockist, and retailer is the one where the consumer will go and say कि भैया मेरे को blue paint चाहिए. Okay. So retailer hopefully has the stock of it. If he doesn't have the stock, then he will call the stockist and say that I've got a customer who needs blue paint, and can you send that to me, right? Consumer himself is influenced a great deal by the painter, by the contractor, somebody who's coming home and doing the painting. And let's say 15, 20 years ago, you would be totally dependent on this person's expertise and knowledge to decide what should be the painting color scheme for your home, right? So you say, मुझको हरा पेंट चाहिए, and he says, sir, आजकल हरा पेंट नहीं चलता, आप blue paint लगाओ, right? So he had a disproportionate influence on this entire process, whereby consumer makes a choice of the paint that they want to put on the wall in their house. And if you then go to the store and you ask for the blue paint, and if the blue paint is not there and the stockist doesn't have it, and the stockist calls the distributor, and the distributor says that the next lot is going to come probably in 15, 20 days, ask your consumer to wait. Consumer says that, no, I'm not going to wait. I need blue, and I need to finish my painting in the next week or so because Diwali is near, or I've got a marriage happening. I can't possibly wait for that long. And so therefore I will go to Berger or Nerolac or whosoever else, anywhere else where I can get the blue paint, right? Sometimes over the objections of the contractor also. So how do you increase the efficiency? How do you make sure that the blue paint is available at the right place at the right time? All right. So Asian Paints implemented a enterprise-wide ERP or SCM system. Let me just go back to the value chain and show you so basically the ERP or SCM is integrating inbound logistics, operations, and outbound logistics together. These 3 activities are being integrated by the ERP and SCM system. Enterprise resource planning, supply chain management. Typically, a company like SAP will do it. There are Indian vendors also. Somebody like Aramco, for example, has a ERP system. Okay, or you could go with the Oracle Financials. So these are basically systems which are telling the shop floor that this is the demand and this is the supply. All right. So at a shop floor, you have a better visibility of what paints to manufacture. And if I have to make a can of blue paint, whatever pigments and chemicals and packaging that goes into doing it, I call up my vendors my component suppliers, and I tell them that I need this in so much quantities in this time frame. That's how you run this entire operation. So if you can do it more efficiently, that means you're not stocking unnecessary inventory. You are in line with the demands in the marketplace, and ultimately that leads to more profitability. Okay, but the drawback here is that if you want to innovate, or if you have that one customer who wants something different, you will not be able to easily service that customer. It may take you a lot of time. If a customer, for example, wants a certain shade of saffron, let's say as a paint, it may be difficult for you to arrange that because your systems are tied together in a way that you are servicing the greatest amount of customers at the least cost. That is the industrial way of organizing. Okay. So then what has the company done? Few years after that, they have invested in something called the CRM. So CRM is basically customer relations management, and CRM is at the marketing end. All right. So if I go back to my supply chain, CRM is here. This is CRM. Okay. And so I go back to the CRM and I tell my customers that whatever orders you give, whether to my salesperson, whether to my dealer, whether to my stockist, ultimately are coming into my CRM system. So I've automated that process of collecting the orders as well. Okay, so not merely the inbound and outbound logistics, not merely the operations, but also the order taking I have put in the CRM. Okay, but still there is a human element where somebody picks up the order, takes the order, and inputs it in the CRM system. CRM makes it possible for you to build a portal. So you can actually create a B2B website on top of your CRM, and you can give access to your key people. Maybe not everybody. You will give it to your key dealers, key stockists, key distributors, of course, some larger salespeople, and you can tell them that okay, you can enter the orders yourself. I mean, so all of these activities. So early parts of 2000s, from 2000 to 2005, Asian Paints investment in technology driven by its marketplace is really about more efficiencies at the soft shop floor so that you can make your products faster and cheaper. Then you bring in a call center because you realize that when customers are dealing with a particular stockist or a particular distributor in Maharashtra, as against somebody in Jharkhand, as against somebody in Assam, they are getting different responses. And they may not be getting similar sort of, not everybody may be equally informed about what is happening, what kind of new products are coming, what kind of uh, stocks that we have of different items. So therefore, let me create a single call center. So now that you have a technology whereby everything is on a single portal, you can actually now create a call center, single call center, where all the people in the call center have access to the same portal and they are able to now service the customers. Okay. They are able to query the ERP system also. And so if a call comes and somebody says that I need 100 cans of this color, the person at the call center would say, okay, hold on. Let me just find out how much stock do we have. And he queries the ERP and he says, okay, this is timeline. These are the numbers. I may not be able to give you 100, but I can send you 80 and I will be able to send you by this day. And the customer says yes. And so you enter the order, right? So you're getting more and more efficiency. Okay. Now, what that does is that larger institutional customers, the large builders, the large companies who have a lot of investment in facilities, let's say IT company, can come to Asian Paints directly without having to go through an intermediary, because now you have a single call center and you have a single portal. And so this company can call and say, Asian Paints, I'm building such and such facility for 60,000 people in Chennai. And these are the kind of paints that I need, and these are my timelines, right? So now Asian Paints is better connected to its customers. So what happens is, as you start consolidating information at a single call center, at a single portal, you start getting a better sense of what is it that people are buying, what are the kind of products which are moving in different parts of the country. Okay, so up until now, when a middle manager or a senior manager needed to achieve their targets, so if you are in Asian Paints and you are handling sales, you presumably will have targets that I have to sell so much this year, and which is 10% more or 20% more than last year, right? So this target gets pushed down to the lowest level, which is the salesperson at the field, at the depot level, and that salesperson is told that, look, find a way to move so much more stock. So this guy will go to his friendly dealer and tell the dealer that, please do me a favor. I am under pressure from headquarters. I need to move so much amount of stock. So buy this from me. And we will find a way to reward you probably 3 months down the line. I will give you a discount. Maybe we'll cancel the order, we'll take the stock back, or some, all kinds of malpractices also come in through this because of simple human reasons that somebody somewhere needs to meet their target. Okay. Now what happens is that if everything is centralized, salesperson now have actually customer data. Salesperson now know that this is what is happening. These are the larger trends happening in similar markets elsewhere. These are the kind of colors which are moving. These are the kind of textures which are moving. So now the salesperson, when he meets the retailer, now the conversation, I mean, we are still not entirely doing away the human element. There is still probably that element of cajoling and malpractices when it comes to stocking, pushing inventories. But now you can actually have a little more informed conversation. You can actually tell the retailer, look, why don't you do these items? Why do you stick to standard blue, yellow, green colors? These are some new changes which are happening. Why don't you start taking orders for this? And I have the capability to bring it from somewhere else. All right. Maybe your stockist, maybe your distributor doesn't have it in stock, but somebody else will be able to give it to you. Okay. So the nature of interaction between the salesperson and retailer has changed. Entire chain is automated right down to the warehouse. So you know exactly what is my stock position in a particular town, in a particular village. What is my stock position? And what is the prediction based on the orders that I have got? The shop floor knows how much more of a certain technology, of a certain color, certain texture, etc. I need to produce. All right. So the whole thing is linked to ERP. Everything is very efficient now. Okay. Now, interestingly, as Asian Paints moves forward, because of the connection that it has with the customer, with the larger customers, and you would have seen the advertising also on television, I'm sure some of you may have noticed, they are no longer selling paints. They are selling services. Because several of their innovations, such as new textures, new ways of painting, they are able to push down to their customer. If you notice Asian Paints advertising now, there is a phone number that even a small consumer, even a home consumer would be able to call that number, talk to Asian Paints and ask for a certain kind of a texture to be done. It has become possible because technology has enabled it. Okay. By doing the services, and Asian Paints is just one example, you can probably also think about several other industries where similar kind of changes are happening, where firms are coming closer to the end customer because of all the digital technologies which are at play. Okay. And they are having a better choice of what the consumer wants. In the traditional industrial model, there was hardly any involvement of the company with the end customer. But now you're able to engage with the end customer. So what is happening? Value chain has changed and it'll go on changing. Things are dynamic, it'll go on changing. And it is not as if every paint manufacturer has adopted similar strategy. If you look at it, there are several other paint manufacturers in the country who are still working the same way that they were working. It is serving them well. Okay, these are choices that one makes. Okay, So the big lesson here from this case study, what I have dwelt upon in such detail is that technology services the business strategy. The strategy can be, I mean, if you look at it, in the first phase, what Asian Paints is trying to do, it is revamping the operations process to improve its competitiveness in the market by getting costs under control. Okay. As as the business matures, it is able to reimagine the customer experience. It is able to redo this entire chain of customer talking to a local contractor who will then go to a local retailer who will then talk to the stockist and stockist will talk to the distributor. This entire chain they have done away by connecting directly with the end customer. And now by doing that, they are able to apply new business models. So strategy is moving along. Okay. But technology must serve the business strategy. So what is happening is that the value chain is getting changed. And an effective value chain, like we saw, is not merely about technology. It's also about the process. It is also about the people who are executing on that process. A truly digital transformed business works only when all the related elements of the business come together. The entire 7S model, this is just one way to look at it. There are other models as well, but the point that I want to make here is that there are several interconnected bits, specifically with respect to the kind of skills, the kind of capabilities that you have in the organization, the sort of uh, facility that they have to be able to use these capabilities, the kind of style that you have as a company, which allows decentralization in the first place, right? A lot of companies are not able to decentralize. Uh, the all kinds of related systems, the HR and finance and supply chain management, everybody has to step together for this business to work, right? And that is the big message, that business fundamentals will always be key. I picked up some quotations that I could find, from different interviews. This is Craig Walker, VP and Global CIO of Shell. Shell is one of the largest uh, petroleum companies globally. Craig Walker is the VP, sits on terabytes and petabytes of data. And he says, start with the business outcome, look at what data you need, and then determine what technology is going to deliver this. Don't start from technology and go towards business outcome. Okay. Tiffany Bova, global growth evangelist for Salesforce. Salesforce is one of the most prominent companies in this digital revolution, if I can call it, which is upon us. One of the most highly respected companies globally, which is shaping the global agenda, so to say. And what Tiffany says is that modernizing the technology to be more digital is one piece of the equation. What is more important is the transformation of the people and processes. Didier Bonnet, somebody who I respect greatly, I have followed for a long length of time. He works in the same field where I used to work, which is in IT services. He's the global practice leader for digital transformation at Capgemini, and hundreds of customers that he must have dealt with globally. And this is his opinion that organizations that solely focused on cost containment, I want to go on cloud because cloud will reduce my cost. I want to do automation because automation will reduce my cost. But who are doing this unidimensionally without looking at the larger digital transformation will ultimately fall further behind. They will not be benefited. And lastly, since we are in India, the new CEO of Wipro, Thierry Delaporte, who's recently taken over, this is something that he said in the most very recent interview. He says that we are in a world where technology is more important than ever. What matters the most is business issues, understanding of these business issues, and then using technology to address those business issues. So, end of the day, will consumers come to you just because you have got an app now? Will customer service improve just because you've got everything online now? Will your company culture improve just because you're employing collaboration software now? Those are really the kind of questions that one needs to answer. Whether you are on the consumer side, whether you are on the supplier side, what will ultimately deliver lasting change? And this is my final thought. Normally, I don't give long sentences because I hate people reading instead of listening to me. But in this case, I thought let me put it here. Business, whether in 1500s it was about steam technology changing the way cotton was produced, for example, uh, impacting industries, whether it was Henry Ford's industrialization in manufacturing cars later on, whether it was the use of IT in 80s and 90s, and whether it is about AI and automation today. Business will ultimately get more technology driven all the time. But unless it also defines and executes on a path to value creation and takes its people along, technology won't serve business.